The Blocktalk Podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blocktalk Podcast with me, Brian Welsh. Today we're talking to Aaron McWilliam, Managing Director at Propcall. I met Aaron at the ARMA, now TPI conference at the back end of last year. Aaron's responsible for the day-to-day management of the business across everything from operational service delivery, business development, customer service, marketing, and process improvement. So I guess he's very busy. Anyway, how are you doing, Aaron? Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I'm all right. As you can probably tell, loads of plates to spin, loads of parts of the business to get involved in. But yeah, enjoy it.
Good, excellent. So tell us about Propcall. What is it, and how can it help the listeners in the property factoring and block management business?
Yeah, smashing. So Propcall initially started as an out of hours sort of emergency call handling service specifically for property management. So dealing with a range of things that in blocks and in residential, whereby people will have emergencies or what they think are emergencies after office hours. If you think there's 128 hours a week outside of hours, we specialize in covering those for emergency call answering, including things like video calls. Where we started in out of hours, we've actually expanded the offering into a full 24-hour service. So we do, your daytime call answering as an overflow. We can even do daytime outsourced property management through the day as well. Right. Okay. Excellent. So your website says the best piece of advice you've had is to go with a solution to a problem. I would totally agree with that. Can you tell us why you like that advice, and what's your second piece of advice, and the worst as well? Yeah, I love that advice because it sort of engages the old problem solving part of your brain. You can get the wrong answer to something. You've got a problem. You go to someone that might have more experience with what you think is the solution, and even if it's not necessarily the right answer, you've engaged that problem solving part of your brain, and there's an element of growth from it. Having someone tell you something doesn't really always sink in, whereas actually trying to figure something out and then learning from it is a big part of growth personally from a professional development perspective. And I think if you get teams involved in that sort of mentality, it's quite useful across the business, not just in property management, but actually in every corner of the business. Yeah. I think one of my second favorite nuggets of advice was don't make the exception the rule. People often get quite hung up on a lot of what ifs and a lot of sort of, oh well, this happened one time, we had this one customer had this instance and this sort of happened, and I think while there's a lot of risk management and always making sure you cover for as many eventualities as possible, it's kind of making sure that you don't waste time on things that are actually very minor in the grand scheme of things. For us, we could have a freak instance a site managed by a client, and people might think, oh well, we need to immediately change all the processes for this, and we need to upgrade all these softwares and do all this and do all that. And then when you look at the actual outcome from it, it's the first time it's happened in 4 years. Does it warrant 40 hours worth of everybody's time, or is it something we can put a sort of a different method in and focus on the bigger picture stuff? Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people that do that maybe very early in their business because they're trying to be everything to everybody, right? And something happens and they think, oh wow, now that's a niche. Well, it's only a niche for
1 minute in every year, so it's not really a niche, is it? Right? So
Yeah, look,
I
if
get it.
something happens regularly, yeah, absolutely, you start to build things, but it's kind of prioritizing. You can jump something straight to the front of a queue for a fix when actually it is an exception. It's not a rule.
Yeah.
A customer might want one piece of information in a regular monthly report that you send out, but it might only be one customer in 300 that's actually interested in that information. So, are you gonna butcher everything you've built for one particular need?
Yeah, we have the same thing in software, because you do get, I've lived in property software and legal software most of my working life, and legal was very regulated, seriously well regulated. So you would get, the product would pretty much do the same thing for most firms, but they would use it in different ways, obviously. And you did get nuances and stuff like that. But I remember, because it was a legal software for my first part for, and then remember going into property factoring software. That's longer ago than I care to remember, and it struck me how different everybody works, right? Yeah. And the thing you just need to be so careful about is that if someone comes up and we kind of have this rule now, if someone comes up and asks for something, you've got to go and check if everybody else wants it. Because if nobody else wants it, then your development team are hung up for 2 months. Then wow, you're not delivering to all of your client base. So no, I get exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And it's one of those, isn't it? You get enough requests for the same thing. Absolutely, you build something in, but it's just making sure your time is spent on the stuff that's adding value to the business, not just adding value to a very, very, very tiny part of your overall operation. If someone's got excess time to deal with all those exceptions, great. But the reality of running a business, as you know better than anyone, is you don't often have the time to be fixing that 0.01% stuff. It's the big picture stuff you want to focus on.
Yeah. Okay. And the worst?
Probably a bit of a bugbear of mine at the moment. I think you see a lot of it on LinkedIn. Is a lot of these gurus who go around and say, "Oh, when you first start a business, keep your pricing high. Know your value." And they often talk about how they'd rather have one client paying them £1,000 a month than 10 clients paying them £100 a month. I think that might ring true when you might be 3 to 4 years into a business. Absolutely, you start to understand your value and your market position, but for me, in the beginning of a business as a startup, it's all about momentum. It's about getting out to market and having clients actually tell you, well, that was a bit crap, fix that. That worked really well. We love that. That's the biggest reason, we want to work with you. It's you can get hung up on, oh, I need to charge, for make a shed load of profit in the beginning, but actually the long-term plan should be the momentum and the growth and the sort of the scale of the client base to then sort of grow the margins further down. Looking at our journey, we practically gave the service away in the first 12 months, purely to get that feedback. And that leads to referrals, that leads to recommendations from clients, testimonials and stuff that you can then really build your sort of collateral and your entire business on. You end up with the odd painful client doing it that way, as you'll know. You get the odd one that you think, well, actually that's not the type of client I want to work with. But again, you kind of learn from that experience. And I think if you put that huge barrier in at the beginning when you first starting to say, oh, I know my value, it should be really, really expensive, but with no proof of concept, then it becomes a bit problematic for me, and I think it can kill early startups. That
No, I get it. There's multiple ways to build a business, but when you do it that way, and it's quite difficult when you start, because any business is good business when you start, right? So and you don't get to realize what the bad business is and what that looks like. But then, you jettison the bad stuff, and you've already shown value. And as long as the thing I struggle in business with is people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Yeah. That is a challenge in that argument. But if you're speaking to people who understand what value is and how it can be and how much that value is worth to them, then yes, absolutely, I entirely agree with you. But and sometimes you need to convince people of the value. So
I think the value piece is a lot easier to display when you've built up that bank of clients.
yeah,
It's if you look comparatively to your first year clients and then your second and third year clients, they're getting the exact same service,
yeah,
and you could almost triple your price with the first year clients, and they'd still think it was great value.
yeah, yeah,
But without that proof of concept, without that sort of, I guess, social proof and the proof of delivery,
yeah,
it's hard to really justify that value. So that's why I'm a big believer in the price isn't your main thing. It's not about having huge margins and knowing your value from the beginning. I think a lot of it's proof of concept,
yeah.
proof of market interest, and then refine it from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I am just thinking about that question because no one's actually ever asked me what the worst piece of advice I've ever had is, and and I don't know if this was a piece of advice or not. I remember when I started out, the one thing that I wanted to make sure was that I looked after the team, and I think it's because I'd worked for many companies before where actually, the benefit was be grateful you've got a job and there's your salary at the end of the month. And I remember phoning a guy up, and I won't go into who he is. And I knew him from a previous business life, and asked him if he could sort me out. Now, we'd literally started and we didn't have a huge amount of money. How much is it going to cost me for death and service benefit for the team? Private healthcare for the team, this for the team, that for the team, pension contributions, blah, 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 blah. You'll need to bleep this one out, by the way, Jax. And his answer was, why the fuck would you want to do that? And I said, what do you mean? He said, just keep the money for yourself. And I said, that's not what it's about, man. That's just not what running a good business is about. And needless to say, I don't do business with a guy in any way, shape, or form. And but it just made me realize that actually there's some really good employers out there and there's some really, really bad employers out there. And team, we've had this conversation before when we were at the conference, and, team is just such an important thing. You've just
100%.
got to look after them.
It's interesting that you kind of reminded me of not necessarily again a piece of advice, but an approach that you tend to find a lot of people in business sort of think is the right way, and they always think, if only I had 10 of myself, if only I had 10 of me to do everything. And as well as it being egotistical, it's actually quite problematic. That part of the beauty of running a business and the benefits to running a business with a varied team is the skill sets and the mindsets and the viewpoints of people are so different that it's a huge benefit to the company overall. Yeah. So yeah, that approach of looking after the people, it pays dividends. I think that there's quite a famous saying about you look after the people and they'll look after your customers, and ultimately that's the thing, isn't it? You look after the people within because they're on the front line dealing with clients, and if they feel valued, the clients are going to have a much better experience than if they're just dealing with someone who's just picking up a wage and isn't really that engaged and isn't as bought in. The fella that you mentioned there, I'm sure on a short term he feels like he wins. It's a very short term way of thinking, but in the long term, the business will only grow if the people within it are truly bought in and feel valued.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely, yeah. I've got a question here for the next question, which is, what advice would you give to anyone starting out in business? I'm not sure whether you've answered that or whether you have something else for it, but you can tell us if you do.
Yeah, no, I get asked this quite a bit, actually. I've got a lot of friends who are quite entrepreneurial, and a lot of people, in my social circles are actually starting their own businesses and going off and taking the plunge. And the big thing I always say is stop trying to get everything perfect before you go to market. Yeah. Stop faffing around with a really nice 20-page website and a perfect brochure for your sales process and a perfect CRM. And people will spend a year messing around with a business idea and putting together all these little intricate bits, and then they finally have all their ducks lined up as they say in a row, and then they go to this first potential client meeting that someone's recommended they speak to, and that person throws one curveball at them that just completely obliterates their whole thought about the business itself. Yeah. For me, it's all about just get your MVP, get your minimum viable product out there, get to market, get in front of some potential customers, get absolutely grilled.
Yeah.
Some people will throw curveballs at you that you didn't think about, come back and revamp things based on that. And then when you have figured that out, then spend as much time as you want faffing around with a perfect website and stuff. But it's just get out to market. The failures along the way when you don't have everything perfect in place are actually what helps you build a proper business.
Yeah. If you're not failing, you're not learning, right? So
100%.
Yeah. MVPs are real because obviously that can be used from a software product point of view, from a whatever you're selling point of view, but also the business as well. What is that? Why would you spend 4 months doing the last 5% when you can actually get talking to people with a 95, right? So, okay, cool, good. Okay, so what challenges do you think are facing the kind of industry now and in the next 3 years?
I think so my background pre-Propcall wasn't in property management. So I think that the biggest thing that I've seen over the past few years and that the industry is currently facing is recruitment. I think that if you look at the talent market and the way I feel like since COVID that the industry's kind of cannibalized itself a little bit in terms of talent. You look in the block space as a prime example. You'd have a junior member of staff join on, say, 25k a year, and then they'd be poached by another company who are really desperate for staff on another 5k a year extra 6 months into the role with very minimal experience. Then another company goes, oh, well, they've got property management experience. We'll pay them 5k more than what they're on now. And before you know it, this person's gone 2 years in industry, jumped between 3 or 4 businesses, hasn't actually gained enough experience at each business for long enough to really warrant that pay increase, and ends up in a really a really high paid role with actually very little sort of experience. And, you look at some of the technical and the legal knowledge that sort of senior property managers need to have. And that, the industry is at a point now where the cost of talent is so high because it's kind of cannibalized itself and people have gone round in circles between businesses. And I think that's a big part of why people are looking to outsource. I think you look at the outsourcing market; it's become huge within property management because the talent shortage is there. I think moving forward, I think that will balance itself out. I think as people take a new approach on, it's not necessarily experience you need to work in the industry. I've started to see a big shift, and we've always sort of worked on the basis of we hire on sort of. Not necessarily experience, but more about temperament and mindset and problem solving skills, because we can train the property management into people. That's just a time investment, but the actual sort of application of that stuff is and the personal skills is what we look for. But I think that the future challenge for the industry is, look, property management's a thankless task at the best of times. Nobody rings a property management company to go, hey, just wanted to let you know my block's really well looked after. And, I'm really happy with the quality of cleaning in the communal areas. And I'm really happy with the exterior to the building. I think a block factoring or a block management employee would probably fall off their chair and not have a clue what to do if someone did. Leaseholder meetings and AGMs and whatnot aside, very rarely happens. A call comes in and it's a problem to solve. So with it being such a thankless task and, more industry red tape coming in and more legislation, I think it's going to start to really sort of drive higher stress levels. It's quite fortunate that what we do, I guess, it provides a bit of work-life balance, particularly on the sort of out of hours. So I feel like we're helping to sort of shift some of that weight from people's shoulders, at least to get to, go home on a Friday and disengage their brains a little bit. I think that sort of risk and the stress associated with property management is going to hamper that recruitment.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. And what was IRPM, now TPI, bring out an annual survey of well-being and these sort of things in the industry. Certainly, currently covering England and Wales, and there's a lot of chat about the amount of stress and everything that these guys are under, and absolutely they are. Okay, interesting. Actually, I was speaking to someone the other day, who I must actually send your way, who was saying to me, because I said, so what happens when something happens overnight? And the guy puts his hand up, and I get a phone call. I said, right, how many nights have you been now? This is a probably about under 2,000 units, property factor, Scotland. And then I said, and how many times have you been called out in the last week? He went, or how many times has your phone rang in the last week? 4 or 5. And I was like, bloody hell, that's quite bad. I mean, I've got a very, very good friend of mine who is a surgeon, and he gets called out on a regular basis, but hey, he expects to, right? So when he's on call at night. And it just made me think, because then we had a discussion. So what? Because then we discussed outsourcing in this meeting, and he's like, yeah, but they don't know the property, and I'm like, yeah, they do, because they could have access to your records. Yeah, but what about they need an alarm code? Well, that would be in your records. Well, what about where to find this cupboard? Well, that would be in your records, right? So all of the kind of what in business I guess we would say was objections are actually I mean, okay, everyone objection handles in the sales process, right? So, and I wasn't trying to sell your product, I was just asking a question. But every single thing came back to the same answer. So actually the shift from that one person having to answer the phone to you guys is actually not that difficult a shift, is it?
Honestly, I think it probably surprises people how easy that can be. We have sort of templates and overviews of the type of information we need. And the reality is, look, not every call you get is actually an emergency. That we probably instruct on less than 10% of calls. But when we do instruct, yes, we need access. Yes, we need to know where a certain part of the building is to isolate water or something like that. But a lot of that information, as you touched on, if you're doing the right things within your CRM, and you've given access to that, there's no need for you to do any extra work.
That's where CPL comes in. Yeah. So.
Yeah, 100%. You've got that information there. It's all easily accessible. We log in, we access the building information, we instruct a contractor to attend, and quite often, some of those contractors might actually already be familiar with the building anyway. We don't just work with our own network of suppliers. Actually, if a client comes on board and they've got a plumber who will go out at 3:00 on a Sunday morning, absolutely, we'll default to those, and they might even have experience with the building. But it's not that difficult to outsource what is it has a surprising knock-on effect. That one call in the middle of the night might feel like nothing. It might be 5 minutes, but that's disturbed your sleep. And then you wake up the next day and you're probably operating at about 70% because you're tired. And then, the missed opportunities that come as a result of that. And from a staffing perspective, if that responsibility is handed down, the stress and anxiety that comes when that phone rings. We've had clients say to us that, the best part about sort of working with us is that knowing that if that phone rings out of hours, it's dealt with. The client we had told us that she used to get real bad anxiety about the ringtone that was on a work phone, and she's not heard it in 3 years because that out of hours phone never rings anymore because it just bounces it straight out to us.
I bet if she's in a pub or something like that, she hears that ringtone, she freaks out because it's the association, isn't it?
I've been there myself. I've when we first started the business, it was myself and 4 people. Thankfully, I'm lucky enough now. There's just over 50 of them. So there's a few layers between me and those sort of middle of the night escalation calls to management, because we go through that process internally before we default to a client. We really don't want to disturb people out of hours unless we absolutely need to. Yeah. And when I was the one on call, I had this rubbish Samsung phone with a terrible ringtone. And if you ask my wife now, as soon as she hears that ringtone anywhere, it freaks her out. It freaks me out and it freaks her out. She thinks, oh God, there's a problem, default. Again, quite fortunate that's been a few years since that's happened, but that you never really shake that.
No, yeah. I get it. Okay, cool. Right. So one last question for you. We recently did a podcast on AI with one of the guys who works with us, actually. It was a really, really interesting podcast. All a bit scary, obviously. What's your perspective on AI?
I think in its current guise, AI is an enabler. From an efficiency perspective, I think it's massive. I think used in the right way, it can really benefit businesses. I don't see it ever replacing the human element in a lot of what we do. You know, I don't really see it being the front end for us at any point. I think there's certain value in, you know, certain processes that you can follow with it, and you know, we are looking at incorporating AI into some of the sort of more admin based side of what we do, and some of the systems that we work in, particularly on the sort of call answering side. But I think that the main thing with AI is it's scary, but in a good way, how much more efficient AI can make a business, and you know, you can then put that resource into other areas. You know, if you need half the amount of admin staff as a block factor, you can then get more block management specialists. You can get more property managers. You can get more asset managers on board. For you know, more bang for your buck. So, you know, people.
Yeah,
100%. So it's a big enabler for me. Look, you know, as it gets better, I'm sure there'll be arguments that it can completely replace humans in some respect, but I think right now in its current guise, it's a huge enabler for efficiency.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that. I mean, from a software perspective, there's a number of things that we already do, and a number of ideas we've got for the future as well. For that, you know, for letter writing, for you know, for working out what's a title deed or a lease, and all of these sort of things, you know, is reasonably straightforward stuff. I mean, what is AI? I mean, someone just once described it to me as just more sophisticated software, and I guess that's what it is, isn't it? The one scary one for me recently, and in fact, Jackson and I were talking about this the other week. I don't know if you've been on the phone to your bank recently, and it says, "Would you like to record or set your voice up as a way to authenticate yourself when you're talking to your bank?"
Yeah.
And my answer was bleep no, right? And I'll tell you the reason. So I've got a very, very good friend of mine who I went to school with. Actually, he's had a lot of medical issues, and he doesn't have a larynx anymore. So he has a button that he presses to speak. And he's in a good place, and we have no, I'm not going to the jokes we have. Anyway, yes, that's an entirely different conversation. But anyway, so he has this new tool that he lives in Holland. He has this new tool on his phone. It's a bit of AI software. It's in beta at the moment, okay? And he speaks into it with his button, and out the other end comes what his voice was like pre-op. Okay?
Wow.
Now, this technology did not exist pre his op. So they have actually recorded it from home videos and videos that they had.
Wow.
And I will tell you that it is just him. And he said, and you know, and they're gonna introduce this into Teams and everything like that. And I'm like, so what you're telling me is I could be sitting on your Teams with that linked in. I could be speaking, it would come out with your voice without my video on. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, that is bloody scary. Yeah. That was very, very scary. So I think absolutely AI has a place, and you know, in both the industry that I serve and you serve, we could really, really use it in our businesses. But yeah, there's some of the stuff involved in it I do find a wee bit, I'm like, where's that going to go? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit creepy. I think the control and regulation of it is already a massive talking point. I think that you know, you can make fake videos of you know, the US president saying all sorts of things, can't you? Yeah, people will buy it. You know, they've now got automated ways of recognizing if something is AI, and it flags it on social media now, just to say, just before you get too excited about this is just an AI generated. But again, as it gets more sophisticated, it's going to be harder to track what is AI and
yeah,
because
it's going to be fighting against each other, isn't it? To see who wins that battle. Yeah. Okay, brilliant, Aaron. Thanks very much for coming on. 100%. That's been really, really useful. Thank you.